Welcome to the Peep Show podcast.
Your glance at sex, society, and culture.
With Jesse and PJ Sage. Hello everyone, we're super excited to bring you another special episode with coverage from AVN. We will start out back on the expo floor with a brief interview with iWantEmpire's Violet Doll. She'll be talking to us about her Findom career and her clip production. Next, we'll bring you a news segment with the help of VICE Motherboard editor and journalist Samantha Cole. She will be talking to us about Reddit, deepfakes, and consent. And lastly, we will feature an extended interview of queer pornographer Courtney Trouble about their roots in Riot Grrrl, their work in queer pornography, and the politics of AVN.
So we're here at AVN with Violet Doll. Violet Doll specializes in femdom, findom, hypnodom, all kinds of domination, and she's well known for her clips. So Violet, tell us a little bit about your work and how you got into it.
Well, I started camming on just kind of a normal vanilla cam site about 10 years ago. And yeah, it's been a while. And I started to get customers who were more on the submissive side, and they'd make requests. I actually had my first financial domination customer probably back in 2007, so it's been over 10 years. And I started to realize that it was more natural for me to be dominant with these men rather than kind of be like a pleaser or, submit to their fantasies. I realized that I enjoyed the control aspect, so I focused on Findom and femdom, and here I am.
Yeah, so we run this podcast, but I also work in the industry, and I work as a phone sex operator, and I noticed recently that I'm getting more and more clients requesting financial domination, and it seems like something that's coming into much more popularity recently, and I actually don't do that. I don't know that much about it, so I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about how you do that, and if you agree that that's raising in popularity, or what you think about it.
It's definitely becoming more popular. I think more sex workers are catching on to it for the easy money aspect. If you want to make money, then why not try it out? There is a lot more kind of psychological stuff that goes into it. I think it takes a little bit of experience to learn the psychological aspect of financial domination. A lot of these guys, it's just like femdom in a way. They're about giving up control, and by handing over their money to a woman, they're giving up, power and control. It's a power exchange, really. The fetish has been it's been around for a long time. It's nothing new. It's just starting to become more widespread online, I think.
So another thing we wanted to talk about is your clips, because they're extraordinarily well produced. I think you just put out that hacker clip, and it seems like you have custom costuming for almost all your videos. And I just was really interested in your process and what's involved in the production of all of that and all the different things that go into making each one of those videos.
Well, there's a lot of editing involved with the clip you mentioned, Hacked, and a lot of my Hypnodom clips. A lot of it is just a lot of editing, sometimes 2 days of editing. I use Adobe Premiere, and I spend a lot of time adding effects and layering things. The filming process is actually pretty easy compared to all the editing I put into the clips.
Did you learn to do that after you got into the industry? How did you learn how to do all of that?
Yeah, I learned after I got into the industry. I'm self-taught. I pretty much just picked up tutorials online, learned the basics, and then from there, it's something I really enjoy. I learned that I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, so tell me what your experience has been like in AVN and what you're hoping to gain out of being here.
This is my first time being featured at a booth, so I don't really know what to expect. I'm just hoping to have fun and I guess meet new fans, and it's been great meeting a lot of the other girls who do what I do.
Yeah, it seems like one of the downsides of this, especially doing internet sex work, is that we all work alone. So it's really interesting to meet all of the other people who are doing some of the same work.
Yeah, it's great. It's actually, I feel like everybody is so different in person. Some girls can seem really intimidating online, but they've all been so friendly, so that's been really great.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, is there anything you want to plug, or where can people find you?
iWantViolet.com. VioletDoll.com, and I'm on iWantFanClub.com as well.
All right, awesome.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We appreciate you chatting with us. Take care.
We are here today with Samantha Cole, who's an assistant editor at Motherboard and covers the intersection of technology, culture, and sex. Welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we brought you on today because there in the news is a ton of stories, and many of them are yours, about about the deep fake stuff that's going on. So we were wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that and how you got involved in reporting on that.
Sure. So I can kind of start from the beginning just to catch everybody up who hasn't blissfully seen what this is. Yeah. So deepfake is actually the name that is spawned out of this one user on Reddit whose username was Deepfakes. He was kind of quietly puttering along with his hobby, which was putting celebrities' faces on the bodies of porn performers in videos using AI. And that's not something new as far as Photoshop and stuff like that and still images, but this was, think like Snapchat face swapping, but really, really good.
Right.
So he was using an AI algorithm to run this code that would take data sets of a ton of celebrities' faces and combine them onto a porn performer's body who kind of matched the body type of the celebrity that he was targeting and turn that into a video that looked like a sex tape, basically.
Yeah.
I would say a really well-produced one because they were porn performers videos. Yeah. It's like the best ones ever. Yeah, which is obviously very problematic for everyone involved. So that was in December, and that blew up over the last month and a half because people kind of saw his work and were fans of it on Reddit and really liked what he was doing and wanted to do it with their own favorite celebrities and porn performers. So they created an app that you could run to do this for you.
Yeah.
And made tutorials and made it super easy to do. Well, super easy relatively. You need a pretty good PC computer and a little bit of knowledge of AI, not much, to do this on your own. So that's kind of where we are now. That's the origin of it.
Okay. And why did you start reporting on it?
Well, I mean, the intersection of technology and sex and relationships is on my beat. One of my editors caught wind of this on a more popular front page subreddit and flagged it down for me and said, hey, check this out. This is pretty crazy. So I messaged the guy who was doing it, and it's definitely a guy. And he said that he's not a professional researcher. He's just a programmer with an interest in machine learning. He said he just kind of found a clever way to do it. I mean, that's what he says, but, you know, I don't fully believe him at face value because he has a lot of privacy to protect at this point.
Yeah.
So that might not be his real identity. We don't know his identity.
But he talked to you?
Yeah, he did a little bit. In December, when we first started reporting, he was very open about talking, wanted to tell me about how he did it, kind of told me the process. And then as things kind of took off, he backed off and stopped replying so much, understandably. Yeah, he talked at first. I mean, I think these guys are really interested in sharing what they're up to, for better or worse. So,
yeah, and part of that is that there was like a deepfakes subreddit, which I guess was kind of a community around what he was doing. But that's been shut down recently, right?
I'm going to play dumb because I am when it comes to Reddit. And maybe somebody that listens also is. What does that mean? Like, what's a subreddit?
I can explain that.
Yeah, go for it.
Want.
I've never been on Reddit before.
Oh my God, good for you. That's really nice. Don't start. No, Reddit's actually, a lot of parts of Reddit are really great. This is not one of them. So a subreddit is think about like old fashioned forums, message boards where people kind of post interesting things and links and questions and have conversations, and you gather under one umbrella of what you're interested in. So, you know, I might be like subscribed to subreddits about like history or art or something, but they're way more specific than that. So any kind of thing that you're interested in is probably found on Reddit within reason. So this was one of them. Our Deepfakes was a subreddit where people were fans of this guy's work. They took his username, turned it into like the message board name, and started posting their own stuff. Yeah, and yeah, like PJ said, it was actually shut down. after a good almost 2 weeks of us pestering Reddit and saying, what are you going to do about this? Every time like Pornhub banned it, or they said they banned it, it's not all off the site yet.
Okay.
Twitter said they were going to ban it. And we were like, so what are you going to do about it? This is where it was born. What's up?
Right.
And they finally said, this is enough. We're not going to allow this community anymore. So they shut it down. They found other ways to be on Reddit and stay there, but that main one and a few, actually, they retroactively took down quite a few. There were like doppelganger, like subreddits that put people's faces on other bodies and things like that. People would post like their friends' Facebook pictures and say, show me a performer that looks like her, which was,
wow.
Not great. Yeah, it's one thing if I post my picture and say, show me somebody who looks like me, but he was like taking people that they found on the street and saying like, she's really hot, I want to like see some porn of someone who looks like this person and have that fantasy. So
is that what it was about? Was it about like, I like this person and I would love to see them in porn and it doesn't exist, so I'm just going to create it?
I think that is kind of what motivated it for sure. It was that, and then as it kind of grew, it was more people that were just genuinely, I say just, but obviously it's very loaded, that were genuinely interested in the machine learning aspect and wanted to learn more about how to do that. And this was like an interest and an easy way to do it. So it definitely started as like, that's like they were into the fantasy of seeing their favorite celebrity or whatever in porn. This kind of bridge the gap.
Right.
But that's kind of mind-boggling that it just becomes a quote-unquote problem to solve, for programmers without any sort of, I don't know, consciousness of the political and social implications of solving this supposed problem. Like, that's kind of crazy to me.
Yeah, somebody tweeted or wrote an article or something. No, it was an AI researcher, and he told someone in an article that like they could foresee this turning into a video of like North Korea announcing that they're gonna launch nukes, and then Trump launches nukes, and it's like people interested in jerking off to celebrities blew the world up. Is that what happened? That's the end of the world that we're foreseeing. But, obviously that's like such a hyperbolic example.
I mean, hopefully, before that happens, we'll just all be subject to a much greater degree of criticism or cynicism when it comes to video on the internet, the same way we have long been to images because of Photoshop.
Well, you're right. It's crazy to kind of argue with that, like thinking that it's just a problem to solve because, I mean, if that's your hobby, like I can't really argue with you if that's what you want to do. It's like you're arguing with a brick wall because they don't realize that like the consent issues are a problem. Like this is such an invasion of someone's privacy. You don't have these women's permission. You don't have the porn performer's permission. You don't have celebrities' permission. And it just kind of shows you what they see women as, I guess, in general. Like, I mean, these are
literally interchangeable parts.
Yes, exactly. They're just like parts back and forth and not real people.
Yeah.
So, it's like mind-boggling to talk to some of these guys because I don't really know what to say back to that.
And this isn't the first time this kind of thing has been an issue for Reddit, right? Like just a few years ago, there was a similar story where there was a number of subreddits around what was called creep shots, right? Where there were these whole communities devoted to kind of
I remember seeing this.
Surreptitiously taking pictures of women in public and then like commenting on their bodies and talking about like all of the things you'd want to do sexually. And also some of those communities were focused kind of on underage women or women who appeared to be underage, even if they weren't necessarily. And finally, a lot of those got shut down. And I think the kind of lead organizer of a lot of that was outed and I think actually like lost his job and stuff. But it seems like this is a kind of a cyclical thing on Reddit and that these...
this is just a way more advanced version of that.
But it's the same sort of consent issues that I think are at play. And there's this sort of underlying politics that I don't think like respects women's bodily autonomy and doesn't respect consent more broadly. And just kind of keeps coming up, again and again in these Reddit communities, and at least I find that deeply concerning.
Yeah, it is for sure. I mean, it's that somebody asked me today, what was the takeaway that I got from this and what is the most dangerous thing that I saw out of this? And obviously the fake news stuff is very dangerous and scary. Fake news is such a huge problem already, and I can't imagine how this is going to go in the coming years as everyone can make their own newscast. But the total lack of, any concern for the women that they were targeting was just, I mean, it's not surprising, but it's just confirmation of the internet is a bit of a wild place sometimes. And a lot of people hold these views and just don't see anything wrong with this behavior. And obviously it's very, very problematic.
Right. No, that's shocking, actually, that somebody would think of it as a puzzle and not think of it as people's lives.
Yeah.
The one thing that I haven't seen much conversation about, but I think is important and is also kind of important to us in the context of this episode that we're putting out, which is the AVN special edition, talking to adult industry performers, is that while, certainly I think we can feel for the celebrities who are being put in this position and having their faces superimposed on these sex scenes, there's also porn performers whose content and bodies are being taken out of context in weird ways.
Right. Yeah.
And there's a number of levels in which that seems also problematic to me for performers. I mean, definitely there's consent issues. It's also a form of piracy. Mm-hmm. And like we were saying earlier, I think it's weirdly objectifying. I know that this objectification issue is always a debate in pornography, and I think we come down on a much more ambivalent side, seeing as porn has, having a lot of potential to do other things than just be objectifying. But in this particular case, where you're swapping body parts, it seems like that critique is pretty darn valid.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I talked to a few performers back in December when I first found this and kind of showed it to them and said, what do you think of this? I haven't actually talked to any of the targets and people whose videos have been used. But yeah, that was definitely the consensus was, nobody asked me if they could use my videos in this. This is my material. And I mean, there are copyright laws and you can file a takedown notice through a lot of websites, even tube sites have them.
Right.
So the performers can do that. That's one way. But I mean, it's once it's out there, it's out there. It's once
I was actually
pirating it, it's in the wild.
Yeah, I was thinking about it in another way, though, which, yes, I mean, there's the copyright infringement issues, but I think it's also bad because when we're talking about this and we're talking about the humiliation of all of the celebrities who have this happen, it's also shaming porn performers. The most embarrassing thing that could happen is somebody could find you in a porn video. And I think that there's something interesting about the way in which this is being spoken about, too.
Definitely. Yeah. I've seen quite a bit of coverage that was kind of gasp, clutch my pearls kind of coverage. And I don't quite get behind that. I mean, the problem isn't that it's sex. It's that no one was asked their permission to be in this. Right. And nobody signed up for this.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, it's a hard line to kind of walk, I guess. I mean, I think I told you guys I talked to Delia D about this, and she was kind of giving me some insights on how things can get crazy, run rampant, out of your control. And she was like, I'm not concerned about me. I'm concerned about my neighbor because they didn't sign up for this. They didn't ask to be in a sex scene. It was not, anything that they're prepared to handle.
Yeah. Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I totally agree that this is right now it's in the shock factor phase, and I think we're going to have to let that go and get into what this really means in a lot of other more nuanced ways. Yeah, it being porn right now will definitely fade. People will get bored with their hobby on Reddit and move on to something more serious. And I think that's where it'll get dangerous is people will move to more mundane things and people will care less about writing those crazy headlines. And and then it'll kind of sneak up on us, which...
Yeah, actually, that's a really interesting point that the more mundane things can actually be the more dangerous things, particularly in regards to fake news.
Yeah, I mean, that's more believable, I guess. Right. It's, you see a person in a place at some certain time doing nothing important, but it proves something about them. And
right.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's much different than like seeing them in porn having sex. That might raise some red flags, but
right. But you can easily say like, that's not mine. And there's a whole movement going on right now with people who are superimposing these images. And then people are like, oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, personally, I know like the issue of revenge porn now has been talked about for several years, and there's been some movement in terms of laws criminalizing revenge porn. And I've always thought that, while important, and I'm certainly not going to say that we shouldn't pass those laws, that they were a bit short-sighted and they kind of focused like just on sex and just on like one very narrow view of privacy. And like I think this case is a good example of why like those laws are probably limited. Like those laws probably aren't going to protect people from having their face superimposed onto a porn star or conversely, a porn star from having your neighbor's face imposed upon them, And part of it is because I think we have like a real hard time talking about like bodies and like bodies on the internet. We always want to think of like things in terms of like information and data, and we like have a hard time of just like treating our interactions that happen through the internet as like involving bodies themselves. And I think like I don't know. I think that's what we're seeing, though. And even when you were talking about, like, these more banal issues of just being, like, superimposed into a place where you weren't. I mean, all of this stuff ultimately is, like, a question about, like, to what degree do you have, like, a right to expect that people aren't going to do things with your body in ways that you don't consent to on the internet. And I think we don't, like, really have a robust notion of bodily integrity for the internet, but that's something we're kind of sorely lacking, and that this is what maybe this case is kind of pointing to again, is that like, it wasn't just like, oh, cool, we fixed revenge porn. It was like, oh no, that was just like the first step of a million other kinds of consent issues that are going to crop up on the internet, and we kind of have to think more deeply about all of that.
Yeah, I mean, that stuff is all very difficult because, like you said, the revenge porn laws are not inclusive enough. The language doesn't include the kind of coverage that you would need for this situation because this is all very new.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there are laws in place like defamation laws and false light that you could bring in if you wanted to take legal action. But when you get into things, more complicated things like who owns your images, and it should be you, but I mean, then you could say, well, the president could say, I'm never letting any news outlet post an image of me, no matter what I'm doing ever.
Right.
That's copyright infringement. And then like it goes both ways. And then a lot of the laws that would protect people also would infringe on the things that make the internet free and open. So it's difficult, but we should definitely be talking about it. I'm not saying that that everything that's in place now is correct and as it should stay. Obviously, it needs to keep moving, and the technology is not going to stop. As we've seen, it's not going to stop moving quickly. I mean, this all just it didn't come out of nowhere, but it got more democratized in a very, very quick time in just like a month and a half. So all of these things are going to keep moving quickly, and it's up to platforms to moderate them well, look out for their users, which I think they're slowly learning.
Some more slowly
it's
than
up
others.
to it's up to laws to catch up to some of this stuff.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you for walking us through what's going on with that right now.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me on. I know this is a crazy, complicated topic, but
Do you want to tell our listeners where they can find you and more of your coverage?
Sure. Motherboard is a VICE website, so it's motherboard.vice.com. And I'm on Twitter, Sam Lee Cole. And yeah, check out Motherboard. It rules.
Okay. Great. Thanks so much, Sam.
Yeah, thanks for chatting.
Thank you,
with us.
guys.
All right.
Talk
bye.
soon. Bye.
Bye.
We are here with Courtney Trouble. They are working on their second master's degree in visual critical theory. They started making films in 2005 and have transitioned to performing 3 years ago when entering into academia. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we sat on a panel that you did a couple of days ago now on BBW work. And so one of the things that you said in the introduction was really interesting. You talked a little bit about the intersection of feminism and sex work and Riot Grrrl stuff. So I was wondering if you could recap your talk.
Absolutely. Well, a little bit of backstory is that I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. I was a teenager in the Riot Grrrl era. I was in high school in 1994, 1995. And in that area, we were just kind of everywhere. Mm-hmm. So the first time I ever heard about Riot Grrrl was actually in between 9th and 10th grade. I had to go to summer school.
I had to do that too. I think around the same time.
My
I graduated
school
in 96.
really didn't like me.
I had Saturday school a bunch too.
And I'll go further into it too. Like things got hectic.
Okay.
Really fast.
Okay.
So I met this girl at summer school and she wore like fishnet tights and like tube tops from the 80s as mini skirt and like these like band t-shirts that I didn't recognize. And at the same time, I was talking to this girl on the internet. This is like 95, right? Mm-hmm. Talking to this girl on the internet from the UK and she has all these really eclectic
the internet didn't really exist then, as it does
sure
now.
did. Not like it existed.
No.
Not like it exists now.
Right.
But my Riot Grrrl friend was actually, we both made poetry websites. So there was like this underground connection of I think there was like a bulletin board somewhere where I met this girl and we would all go to our personal websites where we had like diaries and our art and all of these things. Everybody had their own .com or their own live journal or something.
Right. Okay.
So it was the very beginning of like people learning how to like express their identity online. Mm-hmm. So it was like that was my high school experience, was sort of this connection between Riot Grrrl and also the oncoming like cyber feminist revolution that was happening sort of concurrently.
Right.
So I was publishing in 10th grade, in my first quarter of 10th grade, I started making zines and I got in trouble for selling them at my school for $1. And so they gave me a warning.
Why?
That's
because
how much it cost to print the thing, because I was selling something.
Oh, okay. I didn't. Yeah. I mean, people sell lots of things in high school, like magazines.
Yeah.
But they sell them
totally. And candy bars. Maybe if I gave the money back to my school, it wouldn't have been a problem. And it wasn't too much of a problem until the third issue came out. And what I did was a parody of a quiz in Teen Magazine that was like, "Are you a slut?" And I'm like 16 at this point, 15. I Xeroxed the quiz from Teen Magazine exactly how they printed it in the magazine, except at the bottom where they say if you scored 0 to 10 points, you're not a slut. If you score 10 to 20 points, maybe you're a slut. If you score
Is this like the purity test?
20 to 30.
Yeah.
It's just one of those like Teen Magazine, like you choose A, B, C, or D.
Right.
If you choose C, you get 3 points, and then you add up all the points, and then it tells you what range you're in.
Right.
But it was in Teen Magazine, it was all like slut shaming.
Yeah, right.
So all I did was altered the answers so that no matter what score you got, so if you got 20 through 30, I was like, well, you're a slut, but that's okay because like sluts are awesome. And, I was also doing peer-to-peer education around safer sex and AIDS. It was the 90s.
Right. Yeah.
So there was a huge movement going on, and I was a teen sex educator at my high school.
Wow.
So not only was I like doing all this stuff, but I was also coming out as queer, and I was also molested by my stepbrother in ninth grade.
Wow.
So I had a lot of issues going on.
Yeah.
And with that third zine, I got brought into my fancy ass magnet high school, told that I was no longer welcome at the school. Wow. So I was put on emergency expulsion, which means that they weren't going to kick me out. I needed to come to Jesus and have some drastic change.
Yeah.
So I immediately was just like, Dad, this isn't going to work for me. I'm better than this, actually. And so I switched schools. I went to an alternative high school where I spent the next semester putting together the alternative high school's first school newspaper.
Wow.
And then a semester later, I entered a Running Start high school college program a year early.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting my first college degree when I was 17 years old with a 4.0.
Oh my God. That's nuts.
And when I was 18, I started doing phone sex.
So tell us about that.
So it was just Xeroxing a quiz from Teen Magazine and barely changing the answers.
Barely.
Set you down that trajectory.
It was very clear that Riot Grrrl was beginning to inform me in a lot of ways that really started to make sense to me, mostly around stuff like slut shaming and body shaming, and also a lot about how capitalism and quote unquote the patriarchy really set up this environment where girls and women compete with each other all the time. And, like, it's always over the stupidest shit. Like they say in like the Flawless by Beyonce, we are arguing and competing for the man in the room and the marriage when we should be competing for the best jobs and, the things that men compete for.
So, yeah, along those lines, can we step back a little bit and talk about what Riot Grrrl is, or like what that meant to you? Because I think a lot of folks listening to the podcast may not fully understand what that movement was. And if they do, maybe wouldn't have had like the firsthand perspective on it that you did living in the Pacific Northwest. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So the Riot Grrrl origin stories, as I understand it, is that there were a couple of girls who were good friends. They were getting to know each other through the DIY scene. So they were trading mixtapes and writing zines and stuff. And one of those girls was Toby Vale. She is most known for being in the band Bikini Kill with Kathleen Hanna. But what she was doing at the time was writing this zine called Jigsaw, which were record reviews. And she was talking about how hard it is to be a female music fan. And I really resonated with that. And I still do, specifically like thinking about access to music. As I was growing up, I felt like I spent so much time just trying to deal with the fact that I was a girl, that like I didn't get to hang around and listen to like Velvet Underground records, or like I didn't know who Fugazi was for a long time, I didn't know any of this stuff because as a girl I was like too busy doing all of this survival shit. Like I said, like I was molested by my stepbrother when I was 15. This is bullshit.
Right.
Like guys don't have to deal with that. They're in their basements with their other friends making music and starting bands. And I am in my room writing depressing poetry and zines about how I'm never going to be free,
Yeah.
So the Riot Grrrl experience is very much that, is young girls, very young girls, high schoolers were coming together across the country in what they were calling Riot Grrrl chapters and starting to talk about their experiences around sexual assault.
Wow.
And rape and molestation in the family, in the home. And then they were also talking about how displaced they felt within the punk community.
Yeah.
I came into Riot Grrrl through the most amazing band in the entire world, Bratmobile. So I'm like starting to shake thinking about them. Bratmobile writes these like riffy, surfy, 3-minute long max punk songs, and the lead singer is Allison Wolf, and she dresses like a cheerleader. She does these cheerleader moves, and and she's like red hair, bubbly type, and also a diehard feminist. Like she will cut you down if you fuck up, and at the same time she's so positive and so gracious with her feminism and so gracious with her mentorship. And when I did my early college thing, I contacted, so I was 16, I was at Tacoma Community College, and I was the editor of the arts and entertainment section of the college newspaper.
Wow.
So as I said, I started publishing zines when I was 15 years old.
Yeah.
What do you think I'm going to do?
Right.
Like, you're going to expel me? Okay, I'm going to make it my job.
Right. Sure.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So a year later, I was the editor of a magazine. No big deal. And I contacted Toby Vale. I contacted Maggie Vale, who's her little sister.
Oh, okay.
Who was working for Kill Rock Stars in the PR department. Then she became the vice president. And she was in a band called The Bangs. And I was like, hey, I'd really like to come to your show. Just like typing, like, Dear Maggie. I'm a huge fan of your band Bangs.
Yeah.
I'm 16. I'm at community college. Can I please come and review your shows and take pictures?
Yeah. Wow.
And she said, yes, of course. And I'm going to put you on the list for every all ages show that we have in Seattle, Tacoma, and Olympia for however long you need to. So I was immediately ushered into this really interesting world where I had an all access pass.
Yeah.
I got to interview Allison Wolf when I was 16 years old.
Wow.
And she tore me down when I asked her the big ass question in like 1998 was, is Riot Grrrl dead? Or why did Riot Grrrl die? And so I have had the immense privilege of Allison Wolf being like, Riot Grrrl is never gonna die. I hate that question. And that was one of the most formative moments of my life because I realized it wasn't about this temporary movement or this, the Me Too movement being like this hashtag or this moment.
Right.
I realized talking to Bratmobile when I was that young that this was something I could carry with me for my whole life.
I think I'm probably a few years younger than either of you. And when I grew up in Pittsburgh, which is like a pretty big punk rock city, Riot Grrrl had already left like this really deep imprint. I feel like it had already kind of rippled out through the punk rock scene as a whole. And one of the interesting things kind of bringing it back around to AVN, the adult industry in general, is that there seemed to be within punk rock at that time, so now we're talking like the late 90s, early 2000s, really a lot of space cut for different gender presentations for people within the movement, but particularly for female body people. There was, I think, a lot of space for high femme presentation within punk rock at that time when it was still kind of...
I just heard a man say high femme. I know you can't see me on this podcast, but I'm like looking around like, we just need to acknowledge that. Okay. Wow.
But I think that there was a sense in which I felt, and I came from Trump territory, conservative background, and I totally attribute my politics to punk rock. I totally attribute like overcoming my own homophobia, my own sexism, totally to the punk rock scene at that time and talking to people who opened my whole world up. And I really did feel all of these bands you were talking about, seeing them tour or, the bands that came after them that toured really made me think about like gender and sexuality in ways that I don't think I had any opportunity to engage with outside of punk rock in Pittsburgh at that time. But I say all that because I really do think by the late 90s and 2000s, there was this general sentiment within like at least the little punk rock scene that I was part of that it was expected that however a woman chose to present themselves, that you were going to accept that. And there was also, I think, an expectation that you weren't going to give people shit if they decided to engage in sex work or use sort of feminine sexuality or femme presentation to do what they needed to do to survive. Mm-hmm. And I felt like that was like a value.
Exploit it.
Yeah.
Instead of being exploited.
Exactly. And so anyways, coming back to kind of AVN, do you think that kind of spirit is what helped you ultimately transition then into phone sex and other kinds of work in the adult industry?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it was awesome like hearing about your punk scene. I mean, it doesn't seem too different from how Olympia felt in the sort of the post Riot Grrrl jouissance, I guess. I was living in Olympia when Slater Kinney decided to move to Portland, when the Gossip decided to move to Portland. Like, we were all there for a moment together, and then it was like sort of the post Riot Grrrl dispersal. So I did make it to Olympia. I went to Evergreen State College, but that was after I graduated high school and like finally made my way down there. And I met a lot of rad punk girls who were doing phone sex. In fact, there was a phone sex house in Olympia, and they were all like,
"This is so interesting."
You're blowing my mind.
They just like wore pajamas or like lingerie and like did girl phone sex shows together. Just took calls in this house. I didn't work at that house. I worked from home because I started when I was 18 and, I started working on a phone line that was like co-eds. I had to pretend I lived in Ohio.
They told you had to pretend you lived in Ohio?
Yeah, no, that was the job.
Why Ohio?
Because we're like Ohio State College co-eds.
Oh my God.
And we all live in the same dorm. Don't you want to talk to us?
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not quite as cool as the cheerleaders. I have crushes on them all. I always go to the shows.
Wow. So
and
they
the
gave you like a
games.
persona.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
And
That's so different than how I do my work. It's so interesting.
Well, this was like 1999. So they didn't see my face.
Yeah.
At all. You know, my name was Ashley.
Ashley.
Yeah. And people would always ask me like, okay, they say you're 18 in the ad or you're not really 18. I'm like, actually, I'm 18. Like, this is my first job out of high school.
I don't know anything.
I don't know anything. But at the same time, you know, I was going to, I never got to see Bikini Kill. They broke up before I really entered the scene. So I graduated high school in 2000. I'm actually a little bit younger than all of the like famous Riot Grrrls. They raised me is how I like to say it. Mm-hmm. But I realized really fast when I started doing phone sex that having this persona of like a skinny, straight, but well, you know, I kissed a girl and I liked it.
Yeah, right.
Type of persona for men was going to drive me batshit crazy.
Yeah, sure.
As like a genderqueer, fat, tattooed punk dyke, you know?
Right.
So I got my first Polaroid camera when I was 9. And like I said, I was taking pictures of the shows all throughout high school. Mm-hmm. So when I turned 18, I was also started taking erotic photographs of my friends. Yeah. And that was just sort of for fun. All of these alt porn sites were popping up like Raver Porn and Suicide Girls and Manic Jane and all these sites. And most of them are fat phobic. Mm-hmm. And I was like a size 10 or 12 at that time. So, you know, I was like 18 and little and just chubby and I couldn't get on any of those sites.
Right.
And I was just like, well, I don't want to be Ashley forever.
Sure.
Like Ashley graduated college a year ago. Like this is like year 5, you know, like
I mean, really, who wants to be Ashley?
I'm like, you know, 20 years old, 21 at this point, and like I just want to start my own sex work business where I can use my face and my body and be me. And in order to do that, I'm going to need to make space for myself.
Yeah.
And where did I learn those skills? I learned them from Riot Grrrl. I learned them from Allison, you know, like she's the one who told me in any song, like if the boys are in the mosh pit, go find 5 girls and just dive into the mosh pit, you know, and like make that space for yourself. And I don't know why sex work was my calling. Like I've always wanted to be a model. I've always wanted to be a porn star, you know, like I've always wanted to be a pop star. I want to be on stage. I have orange hair for a reason. I want people to see me. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And to see who I really am. And that, you know, that means that I do need some political foundation to lie on. How am I supposed to talk about being a incest survivor?
Sure. Right.
You know, and a porn star at the same time without these really solid foundations of looking at sex work through the lens of third wave feminism and specifically Riot Grrrl culture.
Yeah, that's all really, really interesting. I think it's interesting what you were saying because it resonates with, I mean, I came into all of this work much older, but some of the things that you say are so like deeply resonant with me because when I first started camming and when we started camming, we cammed together, we had a bunch of different names and we were like trying out different things. And then all of that was kind of working, kind of not working. And then I decided I can't do this. Like I can't do these personas. I have to do it as myself. Jesse's my real first name. And I heard you say that Courtney is your first real name too. And so I dropped all of that and was like, okay, I'm going to be me and people are going to decide that they're into that or they're not into that. And I don't want to deal with the ones that aren't into that. And things took off from there. You know, like things were much, much better.
Yeah, that sounds a lot. That's exactly why nofo.com succeeded immediately. Was like the second I decided to let Ashley be a spark in somebody else's imagination and one of my jobs and let Courtney Trouble be me and my job and like be the real person. Right. Like that's like people picked up on it immediately.
Yeah, that was my experience too, that I was better at my job, that people responded to that better, that the work was more interesting. Yeah. You know, that there was something that like allowing yourself to do the work from the position and the person that you are and being forthcoming about what that is. I know I understand that that's not what a lot of people want to do. Like, no. I get that. And
and so much of my sex work is sort of like in service to the machine as well. And, you know, like that's okay. Like we're talking about people like Kathleen Hanna. She was a stripper.
Right.
Like she wasn't a feminist pornographer. She wasn't doing like, you know, she wasn't doing like feminist sex work. She wasn't Kathleen Hanna, the sex worker.
Right.
She was like, I don't know what her name might be. Bambi the stripper, you know?
Right.
And that was her job.
Yeah. No, and I get that. I just think it's really interesting to hear you talk about, because a lot of these are decisions that I just came to over time where I was like, this isn't working. I have to try something else. Oh, wow. It actually works, you know, to be myself. That actually works, you know, and I think, and that also seemed like a political position to me as well. So I think it's interesting to talk to other people who've had similar experiences.
I was going to say, like, and again, since we're at AVN, I think one of the things that we've been thinking about a lot this past week is the way that the industry constructs these different categories for like sexual desire, and that those categories tend to get rigid pretty quickly, especially like in these kinds of commercial adult spaces. There's a way of talking about markets or like market niches as though that's a reflection of what people actually desire. And I think what's so interesting about your history and like your body of work is that you kind of just said, fuck all that. I'm not going after a market niche. I'm going to make some stuff. And
thank you. Like that's dead on what I was doing. You got it just right.
But people liked it, right? Like
yes,
that's
exactly.
the thing is that
nofo.com has been a website for 15 years. And in that 15 years, there has never even been a tab that said boys and girls.
Yeah.
Whereas
exactly.
like Suicide Girls is like Suicide Girls, Suicide Boys. ManyVids is like ManyVids Girls, ManyVids Boys. I don't even care about gender.
Right.
Like when you go to nofo.com, you will see a bunch of little squares and with a picture, and who knows what it is. You don't know if that person's fat or skinny. Maybe you don't even know what color hair they have because of the way the picture is cropped. That's so intentional. And the fact that you picked that up makes me really happy, because that really is like the basis of my work. I trust my audience a great deal. And I know that they find me accidentally most of the time. And that what they are signing up for is a challenge.
Yeah.
I am challenging my audience to experience the diversity of their own desires. That's always been from the get-go the point. Is like, come in, I'm going to lure you in with this beautiful smile.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't know what you want yet, but I'm going to convince you that these microgenres do not exist.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that one of the things that's such a big problem about how ManyVids or how all of these platforms are categorizing people, categorizing identities and different sorts of acts and everything. I think part of the huge problem with that is it also constructs people's desire. And it's not just a reflection of what it is that people want. It instead causes people to think about things in those categories.
Yeah, like the guy at my panel was like, oh, I'm a BBW guy. And like, I'm a foot guy.
Right.
But really, it kind of seems like he would just kind of do just about anything.
Yeah.
If given the chance.
Yeah, right.
What I'm saying is you are capable of so much desire.
Right. And
but
that's
if you start saying things like BBW,
right,
you're marginalizing so many people. Like, I don't identify as a woman.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right. And I'm 5 feet tall. So I don't really identify as big either.
Right.
And beautiful is attached to woman. So like, big, beautiful woman. I'm like neither of those things.
You're like, don't put me in that category.
No, I'm a pretty boy.
Yeah.
Fat pretty boy. FPB.
Still within the industry, it's very common that for websites to use, the S slur for trans women. Only recently are we seeing some of the major porn companies switching their verbiage in the categories, and still like you see transsexual far more often than you see transgender, and certainly the award is for best transsexual performer, not best trans performer or transgender performer. And my sense is, and of course, like I don't know how everybody identifies in the industry, but my sense is that
doesn't really leave room for a spectrum.
I don't think it leaves much room for a spectrum, and I think that it's oriented more towards the market niche rather than the identity of the performers. And I guess what I'm wondering is, like, both with websites and with the awards, I mean, this is kind of a loaded question, but don't they have some responsibility to think not only about what the market niche is or how the consumers identify with what they're watching, but also like consider how the performers express their own gender identity and to try to capture that in the categories they're using and the awards they're offering?
That's a really great question. So I think that the history of AVN, it's been around for decades, is as a magazine, is as a trade magazine. So where they get most of their information and data is from the sales of films that get reported to them from distributors and publishers and stuff. So they have worked really hard over the past decade to sort of turn what they've always been into something else because the needs of the industry have changed so drastically. I think people put a lot of pressure on them, and they should continue to put pressure on AVN because that's how things get done. 4 years ago, trans women were not welcomed on stage to get the award for Best Trans Performer of the Year. And the way that actually became a thing is that Brittany St. James and 7 other trans women sat down with a meeting with the owners of AVN and was like, hey, how can we make this work? And so the plus size crew has been also trying to do that, you know, but then we got kind of the big blow is that they removed the category. So we don't even have that market niche anymore. So it's like, wait, are you taking away our market niche now? Like, what's going on? And so I like DM'd my friend inside AVN because I have one. So my deep throat in AVN. And, I'll go and I was like, this is from a journalistic standpoint. I am an academic and I want to ask you these questions. And she, I also, while all of the girls in the BBW world are also sliding into my DMs being like, what the fuck is happening? I'm trying to make sense of things. And I realized that Angela White was actually a host for the awards. And she's a big girl.
Right.
So that was my first clue that something's happening. And I got to think, I bet they're trying to get rid of this category. Not because they're trying to get rid of fat girls, but because BBW as like a search term is actually on a massive decline. Like people are looking for big tits, big naturals, chubby, and like the whole world is like going for plus size fashion, plus size models. So there's a verbiage change happening, not in the market, but in the rest of the world. So AVN is slowly trying to figure out how to change their marketing verbiage to actually match what's happening with trans rights and plus size rights.
And to the credit, and I think that was an important point about Angela White, I mean, she's probably the big winner from last night, at least
14 awards
as an individual.
Hall of Fame inductee and Performer of the Year.
Slightly awkward because she was also host, but
she got it all.
But probably deserved it, right?
And also she came from Australia, so they probably gave her every gig they could give her.
Exactly. But I think it's just important to point that out that, relative to historical industry standards, she would be considered larger framed. So, that is just an important point that she was really highly recognized.
Yeah, and I do think that they're looking at the sizes of people's bodies less as a boundary between industries. And there's only a few like BBW specific studios left and nobody really likes them anymore. Mm-hmm. So the transition is like fat girls are getting involved in all these other aspects of pornography like bondage and hardcore. We do straight, we just do normal porn like everybody else. Right. So that's getting ushered into amateur porn categories. Right. And I got nominated for Niche Performer of the Year by AVN, and that was a brand new category. So they dropped BBW Performer of the Year, and everybody was mad. But they was like, we added Niche Performer of the Year. Yeah. And then there were a couple fat girls in that category, and they were all doing fetish work, actually. Right. Okay. So you have fat fetishists, you have cougars, you have MILFs, you have a granny, and then you have me. Which I'm like an in-betweenie. I'm not a BBW. I'm not a straight performer. I'm in the middle. And also, I don't fuck with any of that shit. Yeah. I do kink. Yeah. And bondage and queer porn and lesbian porn. So for me, the moniker of Niche Performer of the Year is spot on. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But for somebody who is doing hardcore boy girl and is plus size, that's not a niche.
Right.
And that's what I think you're getting to, is that the AVN needs to be way more aware of what like pop culture, what the temperature is in pop culture, and try to reflect that. Because porn, people always like to debate whether porn educates or not. Whether you agree that it educates or not, it definitely sets trends. Like it sets trends. So we are trend setters. We are the role models.
Yeah.
So I think it is in our best interests to not look like stupid ancient dinosaurs.
Right.
Sort of have this like dinosaur mentality and don't want to accept like 2018 identity politics.
Right. I think that's really well said.
The biggest experience I have is that when I put my films out to be distributed, I do kind of lose some of the control over the language. And I've had to talk to people who review porn.
Right.
In 2006, I wrote an article about how to review porn with trans people in it.
Right.
There were no trans men in porn when I started nofo.com.
Right.
So people didn't know how to talk about the trans guys in my work.
Yeah.
So I got to have some discussions, and I was nobody. Like I was sending cold call email. I was just like emailing this reviewer and being like, I really want you to write a review about Speakeasy, but before you get the DVD, I want to talk to you about how you're going to talk about Billy Castro.
Yeah.
Because he's a man.
Right.
And if you say anything else, we're going to have a real problem and you're not getting any of my films anymore.
Right.
And he was like, well, how do I talk about that? So I was like, okay, I'll educate you.
Yeah.
It took me, 8 talking points, but we got through it.
Right.
And, he worked for Fleshbot, and Fleshbot has still been a huge ally for me as far as my trans work.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
And same with AEBN, if I could call them out. We've had a lot of films that have been tagged under the S word for trans work, as well as transsexual, as well as genderqueer. And of course, the S word might get more visibility. But if people can't find me or Chelsea Poe, who is my co-producer for all things Trouble Films these days while I'm in school, she's my hero. We have sacrificed the audience in order to keep the performers happy. And that's something, that is absolutely also part of the foundation of my work that's based in punk rock politics. And Riot Grrrl was not trans friendly. And it was mostly white girls, and it was mostly straight girls. So if we do talk about Riot Grrrl, my position on having a Riot Grrrl lens as it regards to pornography is Riot Grrrl was awesome, but it was flawed. Riot Grrrl in 2018 isn't just inclusive. It's like centered on trans women and women of color. Like that's how it should be. It's very important that we bring the critiques of, what did kind of kill Riot Grrrl was that they couldn't figure out how to be inclusive to people they didn't know, and media completely swamped them. Like Rolling Stone, MTV, all these people like killed the scene. So when we bring it back, we have to be really conscious about working with DIY people and centering trans women and people of color. Can I talk about the thing that pisses me off the most about the awards? And it's not what you would imagine.
Okay, sure.
Why the fuck is best oral scene only blowjobs? It's ridiculous.
I didn't even realize
it's ridiculous.
I didn't, but
every single year I'm sitting there like, am I the only person in the room that thinks this is totally ridiculous that there is one award for oral sex and it is just for blowjobs? They do not have best pussy eating scene, nor have they ever included a pussy eating scene in the best oral category.
That's really
It drives
interesting.
me crazy.
Yeah.
I don't care what they do with the fat girls or the trans girls at this point. I'm just like, will you please fix that category?
That's really interesting. Yeah, because who cares about women's pleasure?
It just drives me absolutely nuts.
I feel like that's the message that you get when you don't do that. Yeah.
And there's no trans bodies in that category either. Like,
Right.
You're not going to see oral sex performed on a trans woman or a trans man in that category.
Right.
You're not going to see a trans man dick get sucked in the best oral category. That's not going to happen either.
Right.
So that's the one out of all of it. That's the one that just boggles my mind and kind of makes me put the rest of the shit in perspective. The AVN can't even fucking put cunnilingus in the best oral scene. How the fuck do I expect them to have a plus size performer of the year category every year?
Right.
It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. I think
we
that's
can
a really
keep fighting
good point.
about it.
Yeah,
Riot Grrrl. I grabbed my
like
5 girls and I bum rushed the mosh pit like we did the panel.
Yeah.
And the red carpet every year.
Right. Yeah, that there needs to be some very basic steps before we
Very,
can have
very
these,
basic steps.
big
the
meta
fact that they still
conversations
call,
about the
they
politics.
still put lesbian porn in the straight category.
Do they?
Yes.
This is all very interesting.
Straight and gay.
Yeah.
There's a straight category in porn and a gay category in porn.
And lesbians are in the straight category.
Yes.
Because men like watching lesbians.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
I get the logic here.
Now, if a lesbian went to a porn site and had to click on straight or gay, they have to click on straight in order to see lesbian porn.
Yeah.
Which erases your queer identity.
And it's not just that men like watching magazines, but it's that het men.
Yes.
I did want to ask you one more thing. So you've kind of transitioned in the kind of work you're doing over the past few years. And I understand that you started shooting quote unquote boy-girl scenes as well. And I don't, exactly. Once again, these categories kind of are murky. So
Wait, you don't know what boy-girl sex is?
I just wanted to put it in scare
Hold
quotes.
on.
Just in case
We're in this together, boo. I don't really know what it is either.
But I wanted to talk to you about that because that seems like a big shift, and also moving more to performing and less and away from directing, and sort of what all of that means to you and how you're thinking about those changes. So just kind of open-ended question.
Right. No, it's a really good one. So I started out as a performer. Like I said, I went from phone sex operator to taking my own pictures, selling my own work, getting rejected from Suicide Girls, launching my own website. Once I started my own website, it's just like 2 years after really starting this like self-erotica project. And like trying to think of like who the real like sex persona, like the real fake me.
Right. Yeah.
So NoFo is fitting because it's performative, but it's not Ashley.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So once I started doing that, all of my friends were like, take my pictures. I want to do it. It was about me from the beginning.
Yeah.
Like for me to make myself the person I needed to be in the reality of this world of sex work.
Sure.
And I, continuously started bringing more and more people in. I've collaborated with like dozens of other filmmakers.
Yeah.
I've worked with hundreds of models, like tons. And it just gets overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like totally overwhelming. And there's something toxic about the director performer relationship. And I'm like scared to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I need to like skip through all the personal trauma and just say there's a lot of personal trauma to get through when people are depending on you.
Right.
In the way that performers depend on directors. And when that happens, I become too concerned about other people and I forget about my own needs and my own health and my own mental wellness.
Yeah.
I'm very generous and gullible.
Yeah.
And sometimes I mistake people's friendship for authentic when really they're using me to get famous, which I never really understood because like, as I said, when I was 16, I was interviewing Allison Wolf. I was talking to famous people every weekend.
Yeah.
That was my job. That was my hobby.
Right.
So I never thought about social capital in the kind of ways that other people do.
Yeah.
Like I'm in my brain, I'm ambitious, I'm a Virgo, I'm super talented, like I'm a genius. Yeah. Like I just know that there's like I've tapped into my own sweet spot.
Sure.
I am doing me better than you are doing you. Like the Childish Gambino song says, I sometimes just feel like people could see that I also need to be taken care of.
Right.
And that sometimes the set does need to be about me. Yeah. And I ended up shooting just like a lot of skinny, cis, blonde, white girls who were like working for kink.com and like bothering me all the damn time about getting shoots in the queer porn world. And I don't know how to say no to people.
Yeah.
And I was on set one day. I had planned a trip to Berlin. And this was the winter before I started college. Everything happened so fast.
So you were really young.
Everything happened so fast. I started doing porn when I was 18. I'm 35 now. This was 3 years ago.
Okay.
So yeah. My graduate degree.
Oh, very
Yeah,
okay.
no, 10 years in between undergraduate and graduate. I was on set with 2 really amazing, awesome queer folks, and I was looking through the camera at the sex that was happening, and I realized I was looking at 2 butts bouncing in the universe, and I just got really bored. I realized I was totally burnt out.
Yeah.
And there's all this theory around sex worker burnout, and I was like, I love these people.
Yeah.
I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
So I went to Berlin, and I wrote a lot. I wrote apology letters to people I felt that I had fucked over, and I sent them to those people, and they never responded.
Wow.
But I was like, okay, I don't care. I am going to make amends to myself and to the people I feel like I've hurt, even if they never come around.
Right.
And they still haven't. So that taught me a big lesson. The next month I decided to leave my husband. The month after that, I decided to apply for grad school. That week I got accepted to grad school.
Yeah.
And it just made sense for me to take a step back. And if people didn't want to treat me like a human being, I was going to check out. And at that point, I was just like, how the fuck am I going to pay for a school?
Right.
Okay, now I'm in grad school. Quickly realizing that I want to be a teacher. Yeah. I want to help painters paint.
Wow, that's neat.
I love it.
Yeah.
I am teaching myself how to paint. I am learning all about research-based painting. I'm doing my own research-based painting. I love working with young people from the, college age, especially freshmen.
Yeah.
Because I have this awesome wealth of feminism and self-esteem and power and empowerment skills that I can offer these girls. I might be the first queer people that they meet,
I feel like that too. I taught women in gender studies. And I loved freshmen.
I do.
Because I felt like I remember being young like that and looking at women who had their shit together and who I could look up to and kind of falling in love with with what they knew.
Yeah.
They're
the best teachers.
Yeah. And so I always felt like that was so important. That work was so important.
It was getting into my college and starting to meet the undergrads gave me such a huge sense of purpose. And it felt like it felt far more important than what I was doing with pornography.
Yeah.
To make myself accessible to young people in a different way.
Yeah.
So I backed off big time. I completely quit.
Do you feel like your history in pornography is going to make that career trajectory difficult?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. Right. But I will bring this back to Riot Grrrl as a closing statement.
Yeah.
My school's provost is Tammy Rae Carland. She is one of the original founders of Riot Grrrl. She started a zine called I Heart Amy Carter, and she has taken every picture of Kathleen Hanna that you've ever seen on a record.
She's the provost?
She was my head. She was my main advisor for my first year at my college. And she's the one who helped me realize that I can continue to run Trouble Films as a distribution base, as an art compound, as a platform for Chelsea Poe, who is an incredible porn director. So it's not like I abandoned anything, really.
Sure, right.
I've just been able to turn Trouble Films into a distro. Yeah. And it was because here I am 15 years later, another Riot Grrrl has taught me how to survive.
Yeah,
so
that's lovely.
I'm really happy.
Yeah.
And getting the chance to just focus on my performing has led me to some really amazing adventures. And they've all been super artistic and messy and fun and sloppy. And and I'm having way, way, way more fun in front of the camera and just focusing on that. And boy, girl, I'm calling my new clip series Cock Fetish. With the idea that I'm a lesbian with a cock fetish, because I've noticed when I get on set around these guys, I don't want to date guys. I don't like cis guys, trans guys. I don't care. I don't care. I like cis women, trans women, genderqueer femmes. That's my jam. That's who I'm attracted to. That's who I want to be in relationships with. Sure. But oh my God, when there's a dick in front of my face, I'm just like, it's intoxicating.
Wow.
You learn something new about yourself every day.
Don't share that. I mean, I don't dislike them, but I've never felt that way.
It just feels really gay to me. I don't know. I don't think the guys think it's very gay, but I'm just like, you have no idea what I'm thinking about right now.
That's so funny.
Like we might be in a bathhouse and you just wouldn't even know.
All right. Well, on that note, is there anything else you think we should touch on?
I'm really glad I got to say the thing about the blowjob award.
Great. We will leave that in. It is really mind-boggling.
Yeah. I also really wanted to touch on invoking the politics of Riot Grrrl in this day and age. We have to take the modern take on centering trans women and women of color because it was forgotten in the first movement.
Right. And I think
that's
a lot of times,
one of the most important things that if I really am invoking Riot Grrrl as a contemporary academic and a porn maker, I have to be as a white girl, right?
Yeah, sure.
In quotes, girl.
Yeah.
My work needs to step back so that other people can come forward.
Where can people find you?
Why don't you send them to CourtneyTrouble.com because they can read my academic writing and they can see my photography portfolio and they can see some of the stuff I've done. If people want to see my porn, they should go to troublefilms.com.
Okay.
That is a huge network. You can get everything from NoFo to Queer Porn TV to Fat Girl Fantasies, everything Chelsea Poe's made, all of my performances, and 15 years of queer porn.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
The place that started it.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. That was awesome.
Thanks. Thanks so much for hanging out with us for another episode from AVN. A special thank you to our wonderful guests. You can find Violet Doll on Twitter at Violet Doll, Sam Cole at Sam Lee Cole, and Courtney Trouble at Courtney Trouble. I'm Jessie Sage, and you can find me on Twitter at Sapiotextual.
I'm PJ Sage, and you can find me at Peach Sage.
We would like to remind you that we have a Patreon account and would appreciate your support. Please visit patreon.com/peepshowpodcast. Thanks to Joe Kennedy for the music. The show is produced by Jessie and PJ Sage. Signing off. Have a great week.